Hey guys, we're back with another Super 7 Ultimates TMNT Wave 3 review, taking a look at a figure that is easily among the top of my list personally when it comes to vintage Playmates figures. I'm sure he creeps up there for a lot of folks too, just because, well, it's a robot turtle. So we're obviously, of course, taking a look at the one and only Metalhead figure. We've got him here with the green slipcover. You've got the Metalhead manhole cover there on the front, and then you've got the Turtles logo on the back. I always love the fact that these guys get unique slipcovers. It could just be a turtle head and they could be done, but instead each figure gets its own, which is just cool from a packaging standpoint. Pop this bad boy off, and of course we've got him there in the monster window. You've got him there with all of his accessories, the green background with the brick patterning, Turtles logo down there at the bottom. You've got some windows on the side, and then the back has got a larger brick wall shot, the Turtles logo emblazoned up there in graffiti, and then of course you've got a bio for our original party robots. So let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, our Ultimates Metalhead, rounding out the wave with the only true non-main character in this wave. We had some heavy hitters with Mikey, April, and Rocksteady, and while Metalhead is definitely a fan favorite, he's not main character. He's definitely up there for one that I've really been looking forward to, though, because he's one of those vintage figures that I think a lot of people instantly just think of when they think of this line. He had a vac metal torso, he had light piping, he's a robot turtle, and he was an earlier figure, and one that I'm quite certain folks of my age, no matter how much I don't like saying that, folks of my age think of when they think of this character. No matter how much you are familiar with the show or not, this is probably the version you're thinking of, because Metalhead in the cartoon doesn't really do a whole lot. He barely appears either. He's very, very non-present in the cartoon. But this guy is an early figure that kind of has a lot of staying power. So this is one that I've really been excited to get my hands on, one I'm happy we're getting sooner rather than later. So let's just jump right into it, see what he can do, see how he moves around. He is constructed pretty much the exact same way as the regular Turtles, but he's not the same as a result of his robo design. So I will say right off the bat, he does have some accessories on him already. I've got the backpack on him because otherwise he has two holes in his chest, because that's how it connects. It connects on the front and the back, and as a result of this, it does make him slightly back heavy. I don't really seem to have too many issues with it, but you are going to have to pose him with that in mind, so just buyer beware. We've got a head that can look up. He can look down. You've got some tilt side to side and rotation. Arms only go out about this far. This is probably my one negative when it comes to this figure, when it comes to articulation, really one big one anyway, is he's got these ridges, like a cap that encapsulates his shoulder, and when you do that, it hits the turtle carapace, torso, midsection, whatever you want to call it, and it can't go any further than that. The arms can, of course, rotate. You do have a bicep swivel. We've got our single jointed elbow, give you 90 degrees, and then there is some rotation there. It's not full rotation because it's capped by the the sort of elbow pads there, so don't take it too far. And then you've got hinges and rotation at the wrist. As far as the torso goes, he has basically the same kind of setup as the Turtles do, so you can shimmy a little bit, side to side, a little bit forward and backward, but that's pretty minimal. And then you've got your twist in there slightly to help aid in some sort of waist rotation. The legs will go out all the way at the side. They kick forward all the way as well, and then they do kick backwards, not a lot but slightly, and then you do have your thigh cut up there for your twist. He does have limited knees because of the design, so it's this big sort of just cup that sits over top of his calves really, and it only goes that far. He also has these sort of bendy wires really that connect the top and the bottom of the knee. They seem to be just fine, like they're not too tight or anything, but just beware, I suppose, when you're doing that. And then of course this knee does rotate there. And then as far as ankle, he has pretty good rocker. It rocks further out than it does inward, and then it kicks forward and backward really, really nicely. So he is very, very similar to the Turtles, but at the same time, he does have his own little quirks and intricacies because he is not just a turtle. He is, of course, a robot, and he has some extra design that sits over top of what would just be the normal musculature of Leo, Raph, Mikey, and eventually Donnie. I would wager, however, that the aesthetics on this figure are as important, if not more important to people than the articulation for this particular figure. They are for me anyway. There is, of course, the elephant in the room that we have to talk about, and we're going to go ahead and talk about it right away. The vintage figure, which we will compare to here shortly, had a vac metal torso. I don't think Super 7 ever 100% said, yes, we are unequivocally going to give you vac metal. I believe they said they were going to try, and as best I can tell, they may have tried. We do not have vac metal here. If anything, this is basically the same kind of thing we saw with the God Skeletor from the final wave of Motu Classics. It is super bright and super vibrant. I mean, you can see it under my lights in particular, and obviously I've got some pretty powerful white lights just blasting him right now. He is really shiny. It's not chrome shiny, but it's super metallic. And then honestly, I'm not going to say I'm giving them a pass because it's still nice to me, but I do like the way it looks. I wish we had vac metal, point blank. I would love to have gotten vac metal, but this is what we got, and I do think it looks pretty nice. I mean, the gold is super lustrous. I do have to have my, questions about why we didn't. And when I mentioned that they were constructed, or he's constructed the same way as the turtles, I'm really, not joking. This is rubbery. So if this was the plan all along, was to make this rubbery, that's probably the big reason why it's not, because you couldn't do that. And if it were vac metal, he would only be able to kick his legs out this far, because that's where he hits that. When you start to kick that leg, it does sort of bend this a little bit. So maybe that's the reason. Again, I don't know. That's just sort of my guess as to why. Because otherwise he'd be super limited at the hips. He really wouldn't be able to do anything, I imagine. So that might be a guess as to why. I would love to have had vac metal, but we don't. But I am happy with the finished product. I do think it looks really nice. It is super bright and vibrant, and that's 100% painted too. It's not the plastic. That is paint all over that. Beyond his torso, he does have a ton of paint. I mean, he probably has more paint on him than any other figure I can think of off the top of my head right now in this line. There's just so many little different things. He's got little bits and bobs and pieces sculpted all over him, from the T on his belt to all of the robo junk that adorns his arms, all down the legs with the yellow kneecaps, the green feet, even this wire is painted, stuff like that. You've got the grenades on his belt, and then of course he does have paint on his head too. He does have a lot of little sculpted detail. I think he looks fantastic. And when you get him next to the vintage figure, you're gonna see that outside of that vac metal, it's really, really spot on. I'm really happy with the overall deco. Paint applications are clean and crisp. I don't really have any problems with sort of splotchiness or misses or anything like that. I think he looks really, really nice. And the only way that really you could have made him better was to give him a vac metal torso, I suppose. But at the end of the day, what we got out of the package, I do think is going to make a lot of folks really happy, because I'm fine with it. It was kind of I wish we had vac metal, but then it sort of faded away to, he still looks fine, so I'm not going to really whine too much about it. He does look really good. And I did mention, of course, the backpack. Let's take it off real quick, because we will come back to this. You pop it off, and this is how he comes in the box. So you do have these two holes in his chest there, and then you've got a big slot on his back where it goes in, and then you've even got more little detail in there. And he does have his own unique shell, of course, so it's not just a retread of the turtles, it's kind of a plain turtle shell with some robo accents. And then, of course, to top it all off, we do have his robo turtle head sculpt, which I think looks fantastic. Little bits of paint application here, the yellow, the gold for the mouth, and then the green on the outside. And then he does, of course, have his brain that sits atop of that. And I did mention that the vintage figure, had sort of two main sort of play features, I suppose. One of them, well, maybe not a play feature, but a big thing about them. One is the vac metal torso. The other was that the head on the vintage figure was light piped. So the brain was translucent. Well, the head is translucent, and then it's painted. So the brain, you could shine light through it, and the eyes would light up. And if they didn't do one thing, if they didn't take out the vac metal, they were able to save the light piping feature, because he is light piped. So you can shine a light through that head sculpt, and it will illuminate those eyes. So the best way I have to show this is to just get a laser pointer out in the darkness. And since all of the head and the internals are red, throwing a red light in there makes it a lot easier to see. So if you shine a light into that brain on the top of his head, you will get his eyes to just glow. And I think it's cool. I love it. It's a huge vintage callback. It's a really fun thing. It may not be the most important aspect of the figure from a displayability standpoint, but when you want to mess around with him and be able to do something like this just to mess around with him, or as far as toy photography goes, it does kind of change the game a little bit. So I'm really happy that they managed to keep this intact and then just sort of add this on to a already stellar looking figure. And then as far as comparisons go, here we've got our Super 7 in the middle, of course. We've got our NECA on the left, the Toon Metalhead. And then we've got our Playmates Vintage here on the right. And you can see what I'm talking about, of course. These two are so close. They're so very similar, even down to, you know, the details on the figure that are and aren't painted in some respects. They are the same. And then, of course, you've got the vac metal here versus the painted gold. So you can see this guy does shine a lot more just under normal circumstances. But ultimately, no pun intended, I do feel that I'm really happy with the way this looks. This would always be the preference just because it's nice to look at. It's super chromy. But I think he still looks good. And then we've got our Toon over here. And this is an instance, of course, where the NECA figure ends up being bigger than the Super 7 because Metalhead kind of skewed large in some instances in the cartoon. So they went with the bigger version. Of course, this is the... I've got him with the vacuum right now, but they look similar. Like, they're not too far apart, really. The Toon version wasn't that crazily different from the vintage, but there is a lot more detail on the vintage figure, and of course the Super 7 than the cartoon one, which it makes perfect sense as far as an animation standpoint goes. They were never going to animate anything like that for the Turtles show. So you've got 3 different versions from this particular era. We've got our Super 7 and Playmates counterpart, and then the, of course, cartoon different version from NECA. And then as far as size comparisons go, we've of course got Metalhead in the middle, Mikey on the left. You can see they're basically the same size. Metalhead has a little bit more bulk to him, but overall they're essentially the same, which lines up with the vintage line without Super 7 making him huge for, you know, whatever reason. And then we have Rocksteady here to give you an idea of what he looks like alongside one of the much bigger figures. And then as far as, of course, some other stuff, let's move these guys aside. So here is a Figuarts Goku. You can see he's, you know, pretty similar to that. Of course, being on the same size as the Turtles, that means he's going to skew a little bit smaller than other figures in this line that are, you know, closer to that 7-inch mark. And then we'll move Mikey aside. And here he is with a Mythic Legion. So just to give you an idea of what he looks like next to a quote-unquote normal 7-inch style figure. So you can see he's closer to 6, really. And then something a little bit smaller. Here he is with Motu Origins He-Man. If we don't knock everything down. And then here he is with a G.I. Joe classified figure. So here he is with Snake Eyes. And then because they're always by my side, here is a Plunderling for something even smaller. So you get an idea what he looks like. He does skew on the smaller side for this line, just because of the fact that the Turtles, of course, are a little on the smaller side, so he very much matches up with them, and then he's going to scale really well within anything 7-inch, and he doesn't look too bad alongside other lines as well. He is just going to be a little bit on the beefier side compared to normal say 112 Hasbro 6-inch style figures. Now, as far as accessories goes, Metalhead is pretty well stacked here, and he does have a lot of vintage callbacks specifically. And there's a lot of little things about this guy that I do like when it comes to how they made what were some of his more interesting features into a more modernized figure. So to start with, we do have to talk about the backpack. And this is a really good recreation of the, the portable party pack is what it was called. So it's like, you know, his big army backpack. It's done up in like this army green color. It's got pizza on there, written in there twice, and then you've got sort of this targeting reticle on it, and it's a really good recreation of the actual graphic that's on the vintage figure. So here's our vintage, and you can see they just sort of made it bigger. So we've got that, and then of course you've got the various detachable pieces that go along with it. I do like the fact that, well, I will say I do like the fact that these straps seem pretty robust. That was one thing about the vintage figure that I know was kind of an issue over time, is these straps are prone to breaking. One of my metalheads, I've got a few, has one broken strap, and they didn't hold up all that well over time, but these seem pretty nice. You do have the what was it, the foot blaster, like the radar dish thing. So this of course is a detachable piece. He can hold it in one of his gripping hands, but then you put it in there and then it's like a radar dish. And then you've also got the robo chucks as well, which are sort of like a propeller kind of thing. So you pop this in the top here. It's kind of tight fit for this one. And then you've got that, and it's sort of you know, like a propeller, but then it's also his robotic nunchucks that you can put into his gripping hands, and then he can chuck with Michelangelo. So I do really like that. So he can hold both of these as well. And then he does have an extra head sculpt, which is on him, and you might be wondering, well, what's different about it? And the difference here is honestly one that I'm kind of not sure why they decided to go this route. I feel like they could have maybe given him a different expression, but this is the alternate head, and this is the one that came on him in the box. So you've got two. This is the light piped one. This is just a fully painted non-translucent head. So you've got your non-light piped version here. The colors are a little bit different. Like this is a more saturated, more like burgundy red for the brain sort of thing. And then his eyes are already painted red rather than being translucent plastic. So you have options. I don't think I'm ever not going to use this one because I like the option of having the light piping there at any given time. And then he has a smattering of extra hands. And I'm sure by now someone is wondering, well, how does this translate into the vintage play feature that he had? So the vintage figure, on that one, you actually took his arm off and you could pop this into his arm and it became like a replacement. You know, like he transformed his arm into the chucks. Well, on this version, it's a little bit different. It's a swappable hand and you get a different one. So you get the smaller peg for the hand, and it goes on there like that. And the propeller actually does spin on that one. So you've got that as an option for this. It's a little bit different. It's not 100% to the vintage in terms of what it actually looked like, but it is a pretty good recreation. And frankly, I'm not so sure that I want to be popping arms off of my figures. At this point, you know, this kind of figure, it's not a simple swivel and a pop. There's an actual joint in there. So I'm okay with this as being sort of a middle ground. I'm just glad it was able to be brought into the figure. And then we do have another hand. Pop that one out. And we've got this guy here with like this coil wire. So you can have him like grab the turtles or have him grab the foot. I do wish this was a bendy wire. It's not. It's static, but it is at least posed in such a way that you can have it wrapped around someone's neck. So I do like that. It is kind of cool. It's a little different. You've got his little finger. It's even, the cap is even popped off the end of the finger there. And then he does have a selection of hands. So you get a set of sort of splayed finger, open palm hands. He's got really wide gripping hands on him in the box. And then you get a set of fists here as well. So you get two extra sets of hands with this guy, and you can have him sort of hold the weapons. You can have him with the little tendril thing, or you can have him with fists. And then he does come with a couple of grenades also. Of course, he has grenades on his belt, so that's kind of where that callback comes from. You get two of those. And then we also do get the sprue, the weapons rack, and this one is a hefty weapons rack because it's got the backpack on it. So backpack, the chucks, the foot blaster, and then you've got the grenades there as well. So pretty well stacked. Really the only thing I wish was a little bit different is the head sculpt. I wish it was just a different expression. Maybe a non-light piped alt head with a different expression rather than just a regular head that isn't light piped. Otherwise though, I think they really got him down nicely, and I am really happy that they figured out a way to avoid us having to take our figure apart to be able to utilize this very vintage inspired play feature. So yeah, overall, this is a really solid figure. I'm very happy with pretty much everything going on here. If anything, my main complaints on this guy really are in the articulation area. I'm really not all that upset about the vac metal or lack thereof. It's not a big deal after seeing exactly how lustrous he is. I've said from the get-go, if they can give us as close to the God Skeletor as possible, I'm going to be happy with it, because that thing shines like a beacon, and so does Metalhead here. I wish his arms had a little bit more range, and I wish the knees could go a little further back. Otherwise, though, he moves very much par for the course with this line, but it's really all about the aesthetics on this guy. He looks fantastic. Again, even without the vac metal, he looks amazing. I love the vintage callbacks with the backpack, with the removable parts as far as swapping out the hands, with the light piping. It might not be the most functional or practical thing about the figure, but I love the fact that it's there, because it's so inherently vintage Metalhead. So I'm really glad that it was kept. So that's going to do it for this look at the Super 7 Ultimates Metalhead. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.